Welcome to the other side of midnight. I'm waiting for the music to settle down. Thank you. Welcome to the other side of midnight. This is a really important show. I'm so delighted to have these distinguished guests that we have with us tonight. Richard, our dear Richard, is suffering from a migraine, and I don't know what it is. I know at least 5 geniuses that all have the same, including Graham Hancock, who suffer from migraines. And, you know, you do your best, but when that happens, you can't even do that. So Keith Morgan and myself are standing in for Richard C. Hoagland, as well as Barbara Honegger, our guest, will also be assisting. I'm really delighted that we're going to go forward with this show. It's a groundbreaking show. So this is the 2nd of January. With that, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel tonight. I'm so delighted. We have 3 returning fabulous guests and a new guest. So starting off, these are the members of the 911 Inquiry Lawyers Committee for 911 Inquiry. And first off, we have attorney Mick Harrison, who is the co-founder of Lawyers Committee for 911 Inquiry, a member of the board, and the executive director. He directs and conducts the organization's litigation. Mr. Harrison is experienced public interest plaintiff's attorney with a national practice focused on whistleblower protection, government oversight, and accountability and environmental protection. We also have with us Richard Gage tonight of the AIA, architect, sits on the Lawyers Committee for the 911 Inquiry Board of Directors and also serves as a technical advisor. Richard comes to the Lawyers Committee after 15 years as a founder and CEO of Architects and Engineers for 911 Truth. In addition to being the Lawyer Committee's first on-board technical expert, with his wealth of architectural experience and in-depth knowledge of the forensic facts regarding the World Trade Centers 1, 2, and 7, he will be partnering on a new cutting-edge 911 documentary film series entitled 911 From Crime Scene to Courtroom, and joining other board members for radio interviews and public appearances, while also speaking and doing weekly podcast interviews as part of his new independent 911 mission at richardgage911.org. And be sure and look for that podcast. It's you're going to be amazed. He's got a wealth of information. So next up, we have our dear Barbara Honegger, who has been on the show more times than I could possibly count. Barbara has been a member of the board for 5 years and is now board co-chair. Ms. Honegger has served in a number of high-level positions in the federal government, including White House policy analyst, special assistant to the president for domestic policy, director of the Attorney General's Law Review at the Department of Justice, and for more than a decade was the senior military affairs journalist at the Naval Postgraduate School. Barbara is also the author of October Surprise, which was subsequently validated by formally classified documents that led to a congressional reinvestigation of the Iran side of the Iran-Contra scandal, funded at a level of the 911 Commission, and has been an investigative researcher, author, public speaker, and major activist on the events of September 11th. And joining us tonight, we have a new guest. I'm really delighted to introduce her, Kristina Borjesson, an Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist and documentary film director and producer, has joined the Lawyers Committee for 911 Inquiry Board of the Directors and also serves as Director of Investigations and Board Co-Chair. Kristina comes to the Lawyers Committee after many years working for major television networks, including CBS, CNN, and PBS. And having directed and produced the acclaimed independent documentary film TWA Flight 800. Her awards include an Emmy for investigative reporting, 2 Emmy nominations, the Edward R. Murrow Award, 2 Independent Publisher Book Awards, and the Progressive Radio Network Award for outstanding programming and investigative reporting. Kristina was recently honored by the Americans Who Tell the Truth Project as one of the select group of citizens who courageously address issues of social, environmental, and economic fairness. Kristina also produces and hosts the online program Whistleblower Newsroom. So welcome, wonderful guests. I'm just thrilled to have you on the show tonight. I know this is going to be a revelation for many of our audience, and I can't wait to get started. So, Barbara, I'm going to pass the baton to you for the time being.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, I unmuted myself. Well, I know, I don't just believe that tonight is a very historic program. I would like to say that when I hear all the bios of my wonderful colleagues on the board of the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, I'm reminded what an amazing group of people we have. I mean, you can lose sight of that on the day-to-day work on the board because we are just a wonderful team who get things done. But then when we hear the bios read, I'm really honored to be with these amazing people, as I have been for 5 years. Okay, so what I'd like to do is begin by inviting our executive director, who also oversees the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry's litigation action, so all of our litigation work, and that is Attorney Mick Harrison. I'd like to turn the mic over to him, and what he's going to do is to let the world know about an amazing new victory by Mick Harrison himself, representing a plaintiff in a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit that has been going on for 5 to 6 years now. And we just had a victory in the court with Judge Emmett Sullivan, and Mick is going to let you know about that victory. We're going to start with that. So Mick, take it away.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Cynthia. Good to be back with you. We have had a significant legal decision that took us 6 years to obtain, which we'll be talking about in the first part of the program tonight. And let me, before I get into the details, echo Barbara's appreciation for her fellow board members. I feel the same way. And I'm, humbled and honored to be working with these folks myself. The legal victory we had is a Freedom of Information Act case brought against 2 federal agencies, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which we call NIST, NIST, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. The essence of the case was that the plaintiff, David Cole, who is a longtime researcher on 9/11 truth issues and one of the foremost FOIA investigators, Freedom of Information Act investigators on 9/11 issues, has been for, I don't know, now 15 years probably. David is the plaintiff, and I represented him in this lawsuit with the support of our organization, the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. So we're representing David without charge to David. The essence of the suit was David asked what we thought was a fairly simple question of these 2 agencies. He asked, under the federal FOIA law, to obtain copies of federal agency records that represented the the background and raw data used for a key study done on the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings on 9/11 in New York. Most folks know that the two towers collapsed because we had the unfortunate opportunity to watch that on television live when it happened back 20 years ago. A lot of folks may not recall or may not even have learned yet that a third World Trade Center building collapsed, Building 7, on 9/11. It was not hit by an airplane. The two towers were hit by an airplane. So the FEMA agency had done a study called the Building Performance Study, abbreviated BPS. I may use that acronym. And that study was purportedly a scientific, engineering, architectural explanation of the performance of the Trade Center buildings and some surrounding buildings on 9/11, why they acted as they did under the stresses of the day, and why these three buildings in particular, buildings 1, 2, and 7, the two towers in Building 7, completely collapsed. So David, of course, like many of us, have reviewed these studies, and they ignore all the evidence that's come forward over the years of the use of explosives at the Trade Center buildings. And for those who haven't caught up on that issue, the Lawyers Committee has submitted a petition to a federal grand jury in New York through the U.S. Attorney. We're actually litigating about that. We'll tell you about that later in the program. But there is dispositive evidence, which our colleague Richard Gage has been explaining to the public for, I don't know how many years, 15 years. So that evidence is dispositive, basically, that explosives were used. But the FEMA study didn't really acknowledge that at all. It gave a sort of a general description of the building, speculated that fires and the plane damage in the two towers caused those collapses. On Building 7, the best they could do was say that the most probable explanation they could come up with, hypothesis really, had a low probability of occurrence. And in the case of all the buildings, they said that further study was needed. So David wanted, for the benefit of the public, to obtain what went into the study. And so he asked for things like videos, interviews, laboratory tests, photographs, field notes, audio, various memoranda. He basically wanted to know, what was the basis for these general and apparently incorrect conclusions from the FEMA agency about this most important event in our history, which led to the War on Terror and so many tragic losses. So what happened was, and you'll have to listen closely to this because you probably won't believe I said it right the first time because it's not really going to be comprehensible initially. The first thing that the agency said to David Cole in response to his Freedom of Information Act request was, we don't have any responsive records. So you have to let that sink in for a minute. This is the federal agency that did this detailed hundreds of pages study trying to reassure the public of why these buildings collapsed on 9/11. And they could not find a single record, a single page of records to give to David under his federal law request. That would be the data they used to reach their conclusions. So we knew, of course, that had to be wrong. And David is a persistent soul, as am I and my colleagues. So eventually, FEMA, upon further inquiry, said, well, the reason we don't have anything to give you at all in response to your request is that we gave all of our records that we used for the building performance study to another federal agency, which was NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, so that NIST could do its follow-on study, and we didn't keep any copies or originals, paper or electronic, of our own records for ourselves. So you have to let that one sink in for a little bit. When is the last time you knew a federal agency or any corporation sharing records with another entity in support of a study or some other project to not keep copies of the records for themselves, to have accomplished what FEMA told us they did, which was give everything to NIST. They literally would have to have given their computer hard drives to NIST, their backup email systems to NIST, as well as their primary, all of their paper copies, all of their electronic copies, floppy disks, CDs. I mean, it was another sort of inexplicable and non-credible explanation. So David got correspondence from the agencies over a period of 4 or 5 years before he sued them, trying to get to the bottom of this. At one point, they advised him that NIST had located a bunch of the records that FEMA had given them regarding the World Trade Center building study, the BPS, and those would be returned to FEMA, and then they would release records to Mr. Cole as the law allowed. David was extremely patient with them on this, and they even advised that they would be releasing records soon, but they never did. And after 4 years essentially of delay, David decided to sue them. I decided to represent him in doing that. We sued in federal court in Washington, D.C. And a few months after our lawsuit was filed, the agencies woke up and delivered to Mr. Cole about 4,000 pages of documents that they could have given him 4 years ago. And these documents did, in fact, give some of the sort of the raw data and background information related to the building performance study. But I asked David, my client at that point, to review those records carefully and see whether anything significant appeared to be missing. He did that diligently, and unfortunately, he reported back to me that pretty much all the key documents were missing. There were entire CDs, compact discs full of information that we knew existed that were not given to us. There were drawings of the buildings that would have been key to an engineering analysis of the collapse that were not provided, key photographs, and some key video evidence, to give you just some examples. So I then advised the Department of Justice, who was representing these two agencies in this lawsuit, that we had not been given all the responsive records, and we could prove it because we had independent proof that these key records that were not given to us existed. In most cases, those missing records had been referenced by FEMA or NIST themselves in publicly available documents. So another mystery. How could they have been referenced by the agencies and the agencies not find them to produce to us? So we had a hearing in Washington, D.C. before Judge Sullivan, who's a senior judge at the district court there. And after that hearing, we decided to file a motion for discovery on behalf of Mr. Cole, which I did. For those who don't know the legal process, discovery is how you obtain information from your opponent that they otherwise would not be willing to give you. You do that by deposing people under oath, live, in front of a court reporter, or by issuing document requests that have the same power as a subpoena, basically, or interrogatories, which are written questions which have to be answered under oath. And we thought the judge was inclined to grant our discovery motion. The government filed a brief opposing it and explained that it was premature, in their view, to grant discovery, notwithstanding the irregularities that we could document, because they could explain everything if the judge just let them provide affidavits, which are in the federal system called declarations, from their key officials, and then the judge could determine whether discovery was really necessary. The judge decided to give the agencies that opportunity before ruling on our motion, or before granting our motion for discovery. So that motion got postponed. We ended up doing summary judgment motions. And again, for those who aren't lawyers, this is a way to have cases decided without a trial, because in an appropriate case, there are no facts genuinely in dispute, so you don't need to have the cross-examination of witnesses and so forth that a trial would provide. So we did our motions for summary judgment. We supported our motion with David's affidavit or declaration with the documents we had in hand, and the government gave their declarations attempting to explain the mysteries I've identified for you in the case. And the short version is that their declarations really added nothing new to answer the mysteries. They didn't say anything about the missing documents other really than they couldn't find them. They claimed to have searched diligently for them, but on a close examination, the only place FEMA searched was the office that had received the records back from NIST. FEMA apparently never searched its own original records at all. So the wheels of justice grind slowly, as they say, and it took a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4, I think I've lost count at this point. The case got assigned to a magistrate judge by Judge Sullivan to decide the summary judgment motions. The magistrate judge issued a year or so ago a decision in our favor, which was not a final decision, just a recommended, but recommended that we be granted discovery and recommended denying the government's motion for summary judgment, which was, a tentative victory. It's not a victory till the trial judge signs off on it, and judges are free to reject a magistrate's report. So the victory that we announced, a week ago or so, it was a decision that came down from Judge Sullivan, the district court judge, approving in about 99% the magistrate judge's recommendation, so that the breakthrough that we're talking about here is in 2 ways, and I'll try to get this in before our break. The judge agreed that we should be granted discovery. So for the first time, to my knowledge, in a 9/11 case, from a citizen's perspective, a citizen plaintiff is going to be allowed to do discovery against federal agencies and acquire records and force them to explain what happened to key missing records related to the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings. And we'll see where all that takes us, and happy to answer questions about that. But
so Mick,
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, before you go on, I'm just curious, this first judge that you came to who said, put it off, did you feel that in some way that this judge is really in collusion with these other parties?
Not at all.
Not at all, okay.
No, and the reason I say that is, one, I had a hearing in front of this judge. He asked very insightful questions and made some astute observations during the hearing, which suggested that he got it. He got what was going on. And then he also is the judge that ended up making this final ruling in our favor.
Ah, okay. All right. Well, it's just amazing the patience that you've all had to keep going after this and not to be discouraged and stop. And I mean, I imagine that every day that goes by is more expense as well, raising the money to keep the wheels of justice going.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think all of our board members can attest to the truth of what you're saying, as can Mr. Cole.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm curious, so how are you funding this research?
Very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to fund it. We've been surviving sort of year to year, month to month, and have been fortunate. We've donated a lot of our own time, and we've been fortunate to get a lot of small donations and an occasional larger donation. But we're probably functioning at about 25% of what we should be doing in our budget to actually achieve our mission. Mm-hmm. And now that we've got this breakthrough and have this opportunity to do discovery, we actually need to raise some money specific to this case so we can pay for the depositions. If you've ever been in a lawsuit, it costs maybe $1,000 to $3,000 a day for deposition costs, for court reporters' fees and everything. So we're going to need to raise some additional money for this. We also need to raise money to keep the lights on, as we say, and hopefully get it. Go ahead.
I think the universe has your back, and certainly history will remember all of you. And the more you're out there now that you're closer and closer to some really big breakthrough, I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm sure that resources are going to flood into your work.
Yeah,
They definitely are.
And like to help us, Cynthia, all you got to do is go to the Lawyers Committee website, which is LC4, that's FOR, LC4911.org, LC4911.org, and right at the top on the right, you will see how to help us with your much needed donations with this incredible breakthrough we just had.
Thank you for pointing that out, Barbara, and we will mention it several times during the show. You are on the other side of midnight. We have an amazing panel tonight from the Lawyers Committee of 911 Inquiry. The show is entitled Major Legal Breakthrough in the 911 Conspiracy, and we will return after the break.
The entire building has just collapsed.
theothersideofmidnight.com. Talk radio with pictures on demand. Liberate your hyperdimensional time scale and nonlinearly access over 400 hours of conversation at the cutting edge of science and thought. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive content that fits your interests and time schedule. Filter episodes by guest or subject. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Talk radio with pictures on demand. theothersideofmidnight.com.
Take a look at what is going on with us now. You have vax or no vax. You have mandates or no mandates. You have pharmacies who are not allowed to make prescriptions on substances that they don't, that Big Pharma doesn't want them to have anymore. Somebody's in control of something. There's going to be a time, follow the money, where you're going to say, hey, something really inappropriate's gone on here. We're being controlled. I mean, it's one thing to have mandates and all this, and another thing to shut people up who say, I would like to talk about this a little bit. No, you don't. You're not going to talk. And so we have, people like Dr. Mercola being shut down. That is not us. That's not how we operate. People ought to at least be allowed to have an opinion and state the opinion and have say, I'd like you to know that a good immune system is going to help you. So here are the things for a good immune system, but I'm sorry, you can't buy them anymore because we're not allowed to. So something's going on. So that, my friend, is going to be exposed. That's another thing that you're seeing for a while, and it won't last forever. So it's there now. But believe me, it ain't going to stay, because the light's going to be turned on. Just like the abuse of that I've just talked about of both women and kids with priests and all. It's here in an ugly way, and eventually it's going to be seen. Brian says there'll be revelations, or maybe even a movie about it. It's going to be the same thing that happened when we found out with tobacco, that they were, of course, addicting our children, and they had a cartoon, and they knew that it caused cancer. And you know what happened with that. We basically shut that down, and now we don't smoke anymore. Hi there, this is Lee Carroll. I want to tell you about the other side of the news. In these days where we're not really hearing much good news, or perhaps even what's really happening, that's where the other side of the news is different. And in that, you're going to hear not only controversy, but you're going to hear great things. There are going to be joyful things, too. I just got done with one of the broadcasts, and I encourage you to take a listen with myself and Monica. But the other side of the news, that's what we need more of in these times.
welcome back to The Other Side of Midnight. We were just playing an ad from The Other Side of the News, which is my other show, and we deal with topics that are mostly censored on the social media platforms. Actually, topic tonight is one of those which could be very censored because there are dark forces behind that do not want the truth to come out. So, Barbara, I know you had a key question you were going to put to Mick. Please come forward.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would like everyone to know, seeing as you just mentioned your program, Cynthia, that's separate, but kind of is the child, if you will, of The Other Side of Midnight, and that is The Other Side of the News. And I know that Mick knows this, but I'm not sure that Kristina or Richard Gage know it yet. But we have been invited and have accepted to be on your show, The Other Side of the News, on the night of January 21st, which is a historic day. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Mick again to tell us why that is going to be a historic day. And your show will be the first one, probably, that we will be on after this historic day. So, Mick, let us know why it's going to be so historic.
Okay, thank you. So we're sort of on the verge of potentially significant legal breakthroughs in another case. So we may have two developing simultaneously after waiting years to get them, but it does take persistence. So just to get closure on the first one, the FOIA case, we've been granted discovery. After I get off the call tonight, I'll probably be working on my discovery plan, which the judge is requiring us to submit by 4 days from now. And so this discovery is going to be happening, folks, in short order. So we could really use your support for that Freedom of Information case, because we're going to be doing those depositions shortly and the other written discovery. But the case Barbara's talking about has to do with another side of this controversy related. We did submit a petition with all the demolition evidence that Richard has been talking about, Richard Gage, for so many years, and so many other scientists, engineers, and architects have developed. And the U.S. Attorney refused to give our petition to the federal grand jury from all indications. And we ended up suing in federal district court in New York to force the U.S. Attorney to do his job. There is a federal statute that mandates that a U.S. Attorney give to a federal special grand jury any citizen report of a federal crime, in case you didn't know that. And in our case, our 50-page detailed petition with all the scientific evidence attached was not delivered to the grand jury, contrary to that statute. There is a law that requires us to go through the U.S. Attorney to communicate with the grand jury, but the U.S. Attorney has an obligation to pass it on. So the district court decided that none of our plaintiffs, and this was a lawyers committee lawsuit along with architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, as well as several family members who had lost loved ones on 9/11, and some ground zero responders, firefighters, and so forth. And the court decided that none of us had legal capacity, or stature to sue in that case, which we believe to be a legal error. And the strangest thing about it, the standing has been a roadblock in a lot of public interest cases over the years. And in my view, as a public interest lawyer, courts have been too stingy in recognizing citizen standing to bring public interest cases. Standing basically just means you're affected in some adverse way enough to give you an interest to litigate the case, assertively, so that you don't get sham litigation going on. It's a legitimate principle to a point, but the courts have been, I think, too resistant to recognizing citizen standing. In our case, in New York is another example of that, how shall I say, overly conservative practice.
Seems suspicious to me.
You could say that. Now, the The interesting thing about it, without getting too much into the legal details, for those who aren't lawyers, we had two types of claims in this case. One was the claim that the U.S. attorney had violated a federal statute imposing a mandatory duty on the U.S. attorney to give our petition to the grand jury. We'll call those the mandamus claims. But we also had a First Amendment right to petition the government for redress claim. And the standing analysis is very different for those two different types of claims. And the district court didn't really make the distinction required by law and decided that even for our constitutional First Amendment claim, that we didn't have standing. And again, this is one of those things you have to stop and think about and let it sink in. But what we were doing here, the Lawyers Committee and all of our supporters, and we had, I don't know, at least 2,000 folks who signed on to that petition, and I think more have since. We were exercising our right under the First Amendment to petition a federal government entity. And that federal government entity, in this case, was a special grand jury. Now, we also wanted the U.S. attorney to do the right thing, so you could treat the petition also as a petition to the U.S. attorney. But it was on its face explicitly stated to be a petition to the special grand jury, and we explicitly requested the U.S. attorney to deliver it for that purpose. So what the U.S. attorney did in our case was to obstruct the delivery of our petition intended for another federal government entity. So you have one government entity obstructing the exercise of the First Amendment right to petition involving another government entity. That's simply unconstitutional. And the federal law is clear that anytime a federal official or government agency obstructs your constitutional rights, including the right to petition, that you, the party that's been harmed, the party that had their right to petition obstructed, has standing to sue to get judicial relief to remove the obstruction and have your rights respected. That law really isn't ambiguous. It's been well established. But the district court did not recognize it. So we are, to lead up to Barbara's point about the next potential significant legal development, we don't know the outcome yet. We did appeal to the second highest court in this country, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit in New York. And that appeal has been fully briefed on this issue. And what we want the Court of Appeals to do is to direct the U.S. attorney to do his or her duty to deliver our petition to the grand jury, and also to recognize our standing under the First Amendment to have that petition delivered, and to instruct the U.S. attorney to stop obstructing that delivery. We have an argument currently scheduled to be live before the Court of Appeals in New York, set for January 21st. And we hope to be talking with you, Cynthia, about that shortly after we make that argument. We, of course, can't predict what the Court of Appeals will do on the case, but I can say that I am, as a lawyer, cautiously optimistic. I've given up trying to predict what courts will do, but I am cautiously optimistic on the First Amendment argument in particular, because the law is so clear that a government agency simply doesn't have the right to obstruct the exercise of a right to petition, and any citizen whose right is obstructed has standing to sue. I'm, cautiously optimistic that's going to be recognized. If it is, then the outcome could be quite significant. It could be that for the first time in 20 years since the tragic events of 9/11, that a federal grand jury will actually be able to look at the evidence regarding the use of explosives in the towers and Building 7 on 9/11, and that evidence is so dispositive that, what will the grand jury do with that? Well, that's up to them to decide. But it could lead to a very significant breakthrough on the overall issue, and we're certainly hopeful that it will.
Mick, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it would be maybe a good idea at this point to let people know. I know that you've done this in a kind of a broad way, but to kind of focus in on what the petition is. And by the way, everyone should know that you can read the historic grand jury petition to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, asking that U.S. Attorney to deliver it to a special criminal grand jury on the dispositive, meaning proof, basically, in layman's terms, provable evidence that World Trade Centers 1, 2, and 7 were destroyed and collapsed due to pre-placed explosives and incendiaries. Now, that is a completely different explanation for what happened to cause the deaths of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in the World Trade Center towers on 9/11. So the petition can be read on the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry website. Anybody who wants to read that, actually, all you need to do is in the homepage for this show, if you scroll down below our photos and bios, and then you scroll down below Richard's few items, because he wasn't able to be Richard Hoagland on tonight, and then you will get to Lawyers Committee items in Radio with Pictures, and there will be a link there to go to the grand jury petition on World Trade Centers 1, 2, and 7. That is the substance of our mandamus action that Mick will be giving in-court oral arguments in the appeals court in Manhattan, Federal Appeals Court in Manhattan, on January 21st.
Just a little tip for our audience.
Yeah.
You can use the fast links to navigate there instantly. Just click on the link for 911 inquiry.
Right. So at this point, Mick, any final comments you'd like to make about the oral argument? I don't know if they're going to be live streamed yet. You might want to address that. And then I think we should turn it over to Richard for his comments about these two historic cases, and also to Kristina before we talk about the film project.
Okay. So the oral argument is still a bit in flux because of the pandemic in terms of what procedures will be used. It's technically currently scheduled to be live in New York, which means I would appear in person and give the argument before the judges who would be in person. That may change because of developments with the pandemic, as it has with courts in the past. And we won't know for a few more days. We'll get the word out to our website and let you know how you can watch or listen once we know. It's possible that folks will be able to attend in person, but I'm a little pessimistic given what's happening with the pandemic, but I don't know. So stay tuned for more news on that. We'll get it out in a few days or a week or so and let you know. The last point I would like to make before we go to Richard is that the two cases we're talking about that are developing to, some significant culmination, the Freedom of Information case and this federal appeal on the grand jury petition are both related to the demolition evidence that Richard has been working on for so many years, as have we. And I guess I'd like you to sort of ask yourself a couple of questions. One is, why is it that FEMA and NIST have worked so hard to ignore the demolition evidence and also to avoid giving us the records used in their studies? FEMA is still claiming they can't find key records, which is what the case we talked about. NIST is still refusing to give their modeling for their study of Building 7's collapse, which they're being sued on that by architects and engineers, and I'm representing AE in that suit. So, what are they really got to hide here, and why are they trying to hide it, given that they're federal agencies? If we get a win in the Second Circuit and a remand to the New York District Court to get an order that the U.S. Attorney give the evidence of demolition to the grand jury, we may start to see a breakthrough and start to get answers to those questions. With that, I will turn the mic back to either Thea or Richard.
Well, I just like to say, may it be so. I think that justice will proceed, and here we go. It's the unraveling. The unraveling is happening because the more people that know that FEMA is refusing to give the documents, well, You know, if it smells like fish, there's something there. Mm-hmm. So, Richard, would you like to share with us a little bit from your insights?
Well, sure. And I'm deeply in gratitude and deeply honored by the hard work that the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry has been about. These recent successes are just a smidgen of the overall success that we're expecting in 2022. This is the year of the breakthrough. And I've been at what I've been doing for 15 years, which is assembling the components of the evidence. And we're going to be, by the way, in the third hour of this show, going into it in detail. I mean, piece by piece, so that our listeners really understand what actually happened at the World Trade Center and why we're talking about it in court now. We can only talk about it in court now because for the last 4 years, the Lawyers Committee has assembled all of this evidence that they packaged it as we've assembled it from many hardworking researchers over the last 15 years. So, I mean, it is just so exciting to bring it about. Now, the family members is what this is all about, Cynthia. This is justice for the loss of their loved ones. Finally, they're getting some justice because, you know, me going around the world in 24 countries and 110 American cities talking about the evidence is raising public opinion. Us talking it on radio about it on radio programs is educating the public to some extent, but the courts are absolutely critical. So that's why I was so honored also to be invited to come on to the board of the Lawyers Committee to bring into the Lawyers Committee, inside of the Lawyers Committee, the knowledge, mostly I wouldn't say wisdom, but they have the wisdom. I have some of this knowledge that can be very, very helpful, and I highly encourage people to visit Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. And once again, that hard to learn URL is lc4for911.org, and there's all of these legal documents are there, and they write about them so in a way that you can understand them a little easier for those of us who are not attorneys. I'm an architect, and so I'm delighted that a bulldog such as David Cole, who has been chasing NIST and FEMA for as long as I've been talking about this evidence, has succeeded in getting some real traction here legally. I mean, and the way Mick has explained the lack of response from FEMA and NIST, particularly FEMA, and the judge is just lambasting them, saying, you didn't even do the most basic responsibilities under the Freedom of Information Act. I mean, and so they are
great.
They are hard pressed. I mean, it's going to be hands down victory here, and same with the oral arguments that Mick was talking about.
So, audience, listen, friends out there, everyone. You know, this is really important information. And like Richard said, the third hour, he's going to be laying out the details. And this is juicy material for you to share with your friends. We need to get momentum. And, hey, we need to reach down into our pockets to help support this effort, because this is not just for those families. This is for all of us. This is for our freedom. This event happened to take away our freedom. So don't think if you didn't have a relative there that it doesn't affect you. It does affect you. It affects all of us at the core of our livelihood and who we are. Because if we just let these dark agencies walk all over us, what is left? What is left? Come on, we need to support this action. And I can't wait to hear what you're going to share, all the details, because listen, the word will go out. Come on, let's get the word out and let's reach into those pockets and support this fabulous work. Thank you, Richard. Go on.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to share at this point what some of the things we're going to be talking about in the third hour, because we've got Building 7, as Mick mentioned. Here's a 47-story skyscraper that on the afternoon of 9/11, after the Twin Towers have come down, after more witnesses hear more explosions, this building drops like a rock straight down, uniformly, symmetrically, into its own footprint in under 7 seconds. That's free fall acceleration. That's as fast
Oh my
as a bowling ball
gosh.
falling out of the sky. I mean, it's incredible. We're going to go into details about, find out what people knew, how the building could have fallen that fast. What does the evidence at the site tell us? And then regarding the Twin Towers, very, very similar set of suspicious circumstances. We'll be talking about the freely flying structural steel sections landing 600 feet in every direction after being shot out at 80 miles an hour horizontally. We'll be talking about the pulverization of 90,000 tons of concrete and the steel completely dismembered and hurled so far away, and what that means for how this building could have been crushed. That was 2/3 of the weight of the building. We'll be talking about the evidence of incendiaries in the form of thermite and nanothermite. We'll be talking about the evidence of high energy explosives. The witnesses, 156 of them, talking about their own experience and visual and audio witnessing of explosions and extreme temperatures that the official story can't even account for in the World Trade Center aftermath, in the form of molten iron, which of course takes more than 3 or 4 times the temperatures that office fires and jet fuel can't even get to. So it's going to be exciting.
Richard?
Go ahead.
Hi.
Yeah, it's Barb. I'd just like to be really clear for people why this really matters. What Richard is going to be detailing in the third hour, and by the way, in the next hour, we're going to be going into the Lawyers Committee's new film project, which is intimately related to our World Trade Center Grand Jury Petition, the mandamus action regarding which Mick will be giving in-court oral arguments, we expect, on January 21st. What really matters about this, and you can read the evidence for yourself in our World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7 Grand Jury Petition on the Lawyers Committee website, lc4911.org. Why does it matter? It matters because we have shown with the evidence, over something like 60 evidentiary exhibits are attached to our petition on the World Trade Center collapses. The reason it matters is that the vast majority of people who died in the World Trade Center died because the buildings were brought down by pre-placed explosives and incendiaries. Those buildings were intentionally destroyed. The vast majority of people who died there did not die from a plane impact and fires on those floors. That simply did not happen. They died from the collapse of the towers by these pre-placed explosives. So it's for those people and their family members that we are doing this to get justice for them.
Intentional murder is what it was.
Right. Yes,
Really?
and all the firefighters, over something like 350 firefighters, died in those towers because they were inside the towers when the order was given to bring them down.
Whoa. Somebody needs to mute. Something is going on, please. Go ahead, Barbara. We're almost at break time, by the way. So.
Yeah. So after the break, we're going to go to Richard and to kind of introduce
Kristina?
our new film project, and then to Kristina to talk about it because she is the director of the new film project.
Wonderful. So I just want to remind you all that the site for the website for getting to it is where it just disappeared on me. Here it is. It is L's Lawyers Committee. Oh, you write that out. Lawyers Committee.
No, you don't need to.
Oh, okay. You can
Just
shorten it. Say it, Barbara.
Yeah, L, like Larry, C is in Charlie, FOR, FOR, 911.org, LC4, 911.org. And if you can help us with your donation, we would greatly appreciate it. Right at the top right of the webpage. It's really easy to find.
Wonderful. So we are on the other side of midnight. Our guests tonight are Mick Harrison, Richard Gage, Barbara Honegger, and Kristina Borjesson. And the show is called Major Legal Breakthrough in the 911 Conspiracy. We shall return.
Midnight.com. Join Richard C. Hoagland and an array of fascinating guests as we explore real-world topics and events through the lens of hyperdimensional physics. Join Club 19.5 to gain access to hundreds of archived shows. Only $9.95 per month. Listen in each Saturday and Sunday to the most compelling and thoughtful broadcast heard in over 160 countries around the world. Real research, real data, real science. The other side of midnight.com.
The other side of midnight.com. Talk radio, with pictures on demand. Liberate your hyperdimensional time scale, and non-linearly access over 400 hours of conversation at the cutting edge of science and thought. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive content that fits your interests and time schedule. Filter episodes by guest or subject. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Talk radio, with pictures on demand. The other side of midnight.com.
back to the other side of midnight. Tonight, our guests are Barbara Honegger, Mick Harrison, Richard Gage, and a new guest, Kristina Borjesson. And we are having a discussion concerning the important evidence and work that they are doing around the 9/11 event that was to take away our freedoms, frankly, but they will be revealed. And I just want to give my deep appreciation to this amazing panel of guests. And I want to again encourage you all to donate to keep this work going. It's for all of us. Co-hosting tonight with me has been Barbara, but we also have Keith Morgan, our sound engineer, and he will be chiming in, I'm sure. I love to hear from Keith. And I am Cynthia, and I have been the producer on this show for the past 5 years, and I am moving on to continue with the other side of the news and my art. But I will be saying, ooh, what was that? That was a plane. No. Okay, I wonder if I was the only one who heard that. Okay, so Richard, you want to share with us about this important film that's coming up and bring Kristina on? I'm so excited to welcome Kristina to our show. She hasn't been on before.
It's exciting, and Kristina is she's got the vision for how to take this evidence and put it into the hearts of the grand jurors, because what has to happen here is we have to get past their cognitive dissonance. Just like when you try to tell somebody what happened at the World Trade Center and they don't have the frame of reference to allow the implications of what you're saying, even if it were true, they can't let it in because the implications are devastating to a lot of people's worldview, which means, for instance, if the towers were blown up, and they were, then what does this mean for me? And by the way, Barb, that scratching is indeed you. So you'll need to go on mute, Barb.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. And so what does this mean for my safety in the world? I mean, we're talking about high levels of government involved in mass murder and treason. I mean, that's not easy to just kind of accept. We're talking about 95% of the mainstream media censoring the story of the crime of the century. How does that happen? The media is supposed to be our fifth estate. They watch out over the government on behalf of us, the American people. Somebody up there in government levels has to have our back. Surely our legislators who put together, some of whom were involved in the 9/11 Commission would have blown the whistle if this was some sort of an inside operation, a false flag operation. Well, guess what? The grand jurors are people too. Mick assured me of that.
And Richard, can I give you an insight, since I worked at ABC News for 30 years as an electronics technician, and that
might be very helpful.
I got to see a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and you're dealing with human beliefs, and a lot of times when things come across people's desks, it's like, well, I don't believe that. Instead of saying, well, let's look into it and see what's going on. I remember Ted Koppel used to drop me off at my car every night after the show, and we talk about stuff. And I said, one night, I said, Ted, I think the cigarette companies have a conspiracy going. And he said, Keith, do you really think the tobacco industry has a conspiracy going? And I'm like, there's people blowing the whistle on them and nobody's listening to them. Oh, but then when the guy at the top, the CEO or whatever, blew the whistle, oh, now it's a story? Why weren't you listening to the peons, the people who you report the news to every night, when they all got together and they're telling you something's going on and you weren't listening to them? And that's the kind of stuff that goes on. And I was at a presidential election in Manchester, and a guy comes in and he says, I'm on the ballot for being president of the United States. And I asked the producer, are we going to give him any airtime? Oh, he doesn't want to really be president. He just wants to make a statement. I'm like, okay. But that's the way this kind of stuff behind the scenes goes on. They don't take anything seriously if they don't believe it, rather than saying, let's look into it. And I saw it happen again, and again. And most of the people have made up their mind that the World Trade Centers were taken down by terrorists. The government had nothing to do with it. There was no internal explosions and thermite and all of this stuff that brought the buildings down. But yet, Building 7, nothing happened to it. Nothing fell on it. But it came down, didn't it? Like a controlled demolition. This is the kind of stuff that goes on, and they just ignore it. Oh, that couldn't have happened. This couldn't have happened. And I watched all the stuff take place with the Mars incident when they manipulated my camera crew along with the rest of the media. We're from Goddard Space Flight Center in 1988, and I'm sitting out there wondering, where's my camera crew? Then I find out later that NASA sent out a press release that day announcing a briefing about Mars at the National Press Club, and everybody who said they were going out to Goddard, including my camera crew that was assigned, they went down to the National Press Club. And I'm sitting out there in a packed auditorium wondering, why isn't the media here? Because when you start dealing with stuff that they can't explain and they can't deal with, then they start to cover this stuff up. I talked to my mom's old boss when he was president of the United States, and I told him about how she worked under him when he was director of Central Intelligence. He autographs a card, gives it to me, and then he says something about, if the American people knew what we had done, they'd run us out of town on a rail tarred and feathered. And I was not about to ask him what the heck he meant by that, because I didn't want to lose my White House clearance, my Capitol Gallery pass, and my DC police pass, because that's the kind of security clearance I had. So stuff like that goes on behind the scenes. Things are there that we don't know about, and we never get the true story. We never get the true story. When Ted gave me the opportunity to do 2 shows, and I'm an electronics technician, but he gave me the opportunity to do a show on the Phoenix Lights and Project Disclosure. And when I talked to the people involved, like Frances Emma Barwood, and she's telling me the story about how she got involved with this whole thing with the Phoenix Lights. And she tells me a second story about how the council had voted no, will not build a road through the veteran cemetery. But then she gets a call in the middle of the night, you got to get out to the cemetery. She gets out there and they're trying to build this road. They've got bulldozers, dump trucks. She first thought they could stop them, but then nope. She figured could plow her under and her friend, and they'd never know what happened to them. So they went and got help. They stopped them. But then it went from local control to federal control. By the time it came back to local control, she said all this acreage was missing.
Wow.
And she says this was like, it was the mayor was a realtor or something. This is the kind of stuff that happens behind the scenes. Nobody pays attention to this stuff because they don't think this stuff happens.
And now is the time for us to be all paying attention. And that's what your film is about, Richard and Kristina. I'm really curious, Kristina, I want to know, it seemed to me that you were suggesting, Richard, that the film is going to be for the jury. Is it for the jury? Is it for the public? Is it for both? What? I'm so curious here.
Well, everybody's going to get to see it. But what we're trying to do is tailor it so that it can get into the hearts of the jurors past their minds, past their mental cognitive dissonance.
What Keith was talking about.
Yeah, if we can accomplish that, we can have them acting on behalf of the evidence rather than their own fear. Because what we're dealing with regard to 9/11 is a psychological operation against the American people of shock and awe. That is fear-inducing. We went to war. We invaded 2 countries. We killed 2 million people in the Middle East based on our reaction to being manipulated with fear. That's and anger. Fear turns into anger.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just played, and we're being played again with COVID. It's all a fear operation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think that the jurors are going to feel threatened? I mean, are their identities being kept secret, or, you know?
Can talk more about the operations of secrecy. Certainly the grand jury operates in secrecy. We don't know who they are. Certainly the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney does. So that's a valid question. Mick could address that perhaps more easily since you brought it up, and then we can come back to the film, because it is an important part of this film too.
So should I address the secrecy issue? Is that the question?
Yeah, and the safety of the jurors.
Well, you do want to make sure that you don't get retaliation against the jurors while they're trying to decide what to do with the evidence. So that purpose of secrecy is legitimate. The secrecy has been overdone in some cases. There is a federal statute and a federal rule of procedure that provides that witness testimony to the grand jurors is to be kept secret. It does not require a witness to not disclose their own testimony. A witness can disclose their own testimony publicly. So that, and that secrecy lasts until the grand jury decides what to do on the case. If they issue an indictment, the indictment becomes public. If there's a prosecution, then the prosecution and the evidence used in that prosecution becomes public. And there are some ins and outs, which we actually are litigating before the Second Circuit as part of the appeal we talked about, in terms of when you might get grand jury records before the conclusion of the inquiry. We're actually asking in that case for just enough of the grand jury, what we call ministerial records, to show that our petition was delivered without disclosing any testimony. The Second Circuit will be deciding that question as well. So there is secrecy up to a point. Ultimately, the grand jury's action needs to be disclosed, and special grand juries can actually do a public report of their findings, even if they don't do an indictment, particularly when there is government misconduct involved. So we're sort of hoping that that would be a result in our case as well.
Mm-hmm. Maybe so. Powerful.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Yeah. To segue back into this film project that's so exciting that Richard started talking about, and we want to also bring in Kristina, who is the director of the film. I just want to make clear to people, to answer your question, Cynthia, that the film is going to be available to the public, but the film itself will be bringing to life in video, in a documentary format, in the courtroom, interaction between Mick and Richard Gage in an actual courtroom. That film will be bringing to life the evidentiary exhibits in the World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7 Grand Jury Petition. And the film will then be submitted as a formal supplement to the Grand Jury Petition to the actual grand jurors as evidence.
This is wonderful. You know how Richard loves to say, if it were real, it'd be on TV.
So real would be on the other side of midnight.
Right. So having it, I can tell you, I made 3 books of my art, and it wasn't until they were in books that I thought, oh my God, they're real. It seems so funny. I'm surrounded by canvases, but there's something about having it in some kind of form that is tangible, whether it's a video or a book, that makes it more credible to the audience. It's a strange phenomena, but it's true.
Right, that is true. So, Richard, if you could give us a thumbnail of the film project, and then let's bring in Kristina, who's been waiting patiently.
Yes.
So, as Barbara began to mention, Mick will set the stage legally. Well, what is evidence? What is this evidence? Why is it important? What is the crime that we're talking about? And Mick will be asking me questions about the evidence and addressing the grand jurors into the camera right along the way. And I will be answering the questions and providing very detailed components of evidence in bite-sized pieces that we will issue 10 or 20-minute segments of over the course of the next several months. And then these individually can be seen by the public as well and used to educate their fellow skeptical friends, colleagues, politicians, media representatives, etc. But the jurors are the real target here, and so the public will be in the position of actually seeing the evidence that the jurors will be judging. Thus, the public will be invited to judge the evidence as well, and then to come up with opportunities to give us feedback, such as who should we recommend to the grand jurors that they subpoena in order to get more information. And Mick will want to talk about that, but I know we also have to get to Kristina too, because she's the most exciting part of this whole thing. She's tying the whole thing together.
I just want to punctuate here that this, as far as I know, is the first time this is being done in a court situation. And I want to ask anyone except for Kristina and Richard to mute. So there's no background noise. And I'm going to pass it over to Kristina. Welcome, Kristina, to the other side of midnight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think Richard outlined it pretty well. As a documentary filmmaker, I like also to make sure that the audience knows. I mean, the two main characters in this series of short pieces are Mick and Richard, and I want the audience to get to know who they are as people. People who are sort of major public servants, as it were, because they've sacrificed a lot of time and effort and their own personal resources to address this huge issue and to seek justice and accountability for the victims. And everybody should remember that we're all victims. People now forget that before 9/11, they didn't have to line up in an airport and be patted down or, go through machines or be surveilled to within an inch of their lives. All our lives have been affected on a day-to-day basis very intensely as a result of what happened on 9/11. And if you listen very carefully to Mick describing what went on over those years when he was fighting on behalf of David Cole to get this information, that what he was talking about was our tax dollars that we pay our government going into this expensive and long duplicitous effort to withhold from the public information that they have a right to have. And that duplicity, unfortunately, never really gets addressed and punished. You just have to keep trying to get the judge to force them to not be duplicitous, but they can't be called out for being. They aren't. It's hard to call them out for being duplicitous. You can't hold them accountable for that. So, what makes this project unique is that nobody. First of all, the Lawyers Committee in itself is unique. This is the only organization that is actually trying to make cases and putting together petitions, trying to take the evidence to court on all the major events that occurred, because 9/11 is a series of events in a series of venues. And we haven't even talked about the anthrax attacks. But anyway, so what I want to try and do with, my vision is to really show people through the interactions, first of all, let people know who these two amazing characters are, because Mick is quite brilliant at what he does. And Richard has done something unprecedented, which is gather all these experts, who have joined him in questioning 9/11. And these are all highly trained people and people who know their stuff and they know buildings and so on. So it's not going to be some sort of dry, this is this and that is that presentation. It's going to be a fight. What you're going to see is a fight, okay? Because you're going to see what the other side is trying to say. You're going to see what the duplicitous agencies are putting out. You'll even see their faces in video and stuff, particularly, Building 7. By the way, I think it was Building 7 is 52 stories, not 47. But anyway, NIST's Building and Fire Research Laboratory Director, Shyam Sunder, he did a presentation, and they even came up with a new term, thermal expansion. They had to come up with a new term for this to cover this bogus explanation that they were giving to the public about what happened. And it had never happened before and hasn't happened since, this thermal expansion. So that tells you everything you need to know. But that's what I want to do, is I want to create, it's both a presentation, but it's also a very dramatic fight where all the information that that Richard has gathered meets and all the disinformation and lying that the government these government agencies have done, they meet Mick and Richard where the laws hit the crimes. And so you can see, you'll be able to see how major and how multiple the crimes are through this process. And so people will actually get also a look at how it would actually look in the courtroom. And once you see it, you can make it happen.
Well, this is very exciting, Kristina. It's going to be a privilege to be on the inside of a courtroom in that sense, to have an inside view and to makes the work so much more intimate,
Yes.
Yeah, that's the word, intimate. When you can lay out the story, it makes it hard for people to ignore the truth of it. And
yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say another reason why it's really important is because a lot of these efforts, the FBI was in charge of the 9/11, of getting to the bottom of 9/11, and which, of course, they did not. And if you talk to a lot of FBI people who were actually involved in the investigation, in one way or another, either before, during, or after, they can't wrap their minds around the demolition evidence. They can't. They just won't even consider it, and that could be for a lot of reasons. Just sort of self-preservation in terms of, okay, we did this thing and we failed massively, or some of them I think were actually I don't think, I'm fairly certain were actually complicit and so on, but it's very, very important for the white hat honest brokers in these agencies that are responsible for a lot of disinformation and for covering up the truth. It's very important for the good people in those agencies to see this too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, certainly. And, it is a mix. There are some that are covert and some that really are honest. And I think this is really going to help shake it out, because without evidence, it's hard to defend that you think, oh, this really happened, but you're going to be putting the evidence into their hands.
And it's not just that, too. They're going to see how an honest process in the courtroom should unfold.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay? Not a rigged one. Okay? What if you're not rigging the system, if you're not rigging the court system, this is what this is how this case is going to be presented. This is the honest process that you can watch unfold so that you can see what did and didn't happen. And you will be the juror. You will be, all the viewers are the jurors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the
bringing
idea.
it right home. May justice prevail.
Exactly.
So we're about to go to break here. I want to let our audience know that I have posted on the page under the 911 inquiry items at the top, lc4911.org, and I put a link to donate. It says help justice prevail. Donate to this important court case to ensure our freedoms. And the link is there to directly donate. Donate. Let's keep this going. This is for all of us. This is for all of us. These heroes here that are on this conversation with us, really, they've stepped forth to ensure our freedoms and that this terrible crime be brought to justice. I mean, this is the most important case ever on this planet that has ever been. Seriously. So come on. So we're going to go to break. You're on the other side of midnight. I'm co-hosting with Keith Morgan and Barbara Honegger. And I love you guys. Let's go to break. Our show tonight is called Major Legal Breakthroughs in the 911 Conspiracy. And our guests are Mick Harrison, Richard Gage, Barbara Honegger, and our new guest, Kristina Borjesson. So, Kristina, would you like to continue some more? I really love that you're going to make us the jurors. Yes. All right. Okay.
Mute it.
Oh, Kristina, it helps to unmute.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
That's good. We got to keep something light.
Yeah, I just think that people are going to, it's a lot of people. First of all, 9/11 happened a long time ago for a lot of people. And a lot of people are sort of, this happened. Yeah, forget it. Let's just move on. But this is a watershed moment that because it hasn't been addressed. And again, if you don't address a major crime when it occurs, the criminal or criminals are going to feel as if they can be they're emboldened. If they're not held accountable, they'll go on to do bigger and better things. And I think that's what's happened in this case. And so I think that when people have a chance to actually hear and see and get to know these people who are bringing this case into the courtroom, and to see the expert witnesses and how they handle the expert witnesses, and to hear the other side and how they respond through documents and through videos and so on. And when it's all put together, you can see how not only how colossal the fight is, but how colossal the crimes are. And I think at that point, the light will switch on, and people, because also the other thing that we have to remember is that 9/11 traumatized people. And when you're traumatized, you don't want to visit, you don't want to revisit that trauma. And go ahead.
Well, there's also the factor that we have a new generation. 20 years ago, those people that were babies, young people, they're now of voting age, and to them it's like it never really happened, because they were too young to understand the impact, and they were too young to remember what life was like before 9/11. Yeah. You were mentioning, how we could just go through an airport easily, and now all this rigmarole they put you through. So this whole new generation, it's a new generation here, is going to be educated in an experiential way to really get it in their gut what really happened and what was taken from them.
Yeah, and they're going to see that their normal is
not normal.
It's not normal. And that's the problem, is that it's also a race against time, because as generations ensue, the new normal becomes more of that, more. I mean, now what's your new normal? You get on a train. If you go to Washington, you get out into the train station, and you see everywhere, and you hear the voice saying, if you see something, say something,
right.
It's so Orwellian. I mean, the world has become so Orwellian, and these events, this series of events, was what opened the door for the quickening of that process. And so that's another thing that this series will show is how the seminal acts were carried out, what was done.
I also want to add what you're saying, and it is a seminal act here, is that this fear that they're feeding on, you talk about them being traumatized and how they will become more emboldened for bigger actions. Well, that's what they've done with the COVID pandemic. Exactly. That's exactly what they've done. They have used fear as a tool. And the youngsters coming up, I mean, I have a stepson who's 12, and I take him to school, and I just see all these kids just going along like little sheep with their little masks, and they're just never questioning anything, never questioning any science about anything. It's just they're just following around like little robots, little good puppies. Be a good little puppy. Don't question anything. And these criminals have become emboldened. They didn't stop with 911. They have become emboldened, and they're ready for their next step, folks. It's on the world stage. It's the global takeover. And this is a linchpin here, right here. This court case is going to help that dominoes to bring those dark forces down, because we are in a battle now between the illumination of our intelligence and spirit and light and fear, being controlled by fear. And it's time that we really recognize what we're up and acknowledge it. Like you say, so many people have been traumatized, they don't even want to talk about it. They want to pretend it didn't happen. But it did happen, folks. It did happen, and it's time for us to stand up and be counted, so to speak. And if nothing else, go to this film and share it with your friends. I can't wait for it to come out. So thank you, Kristina. Go ahead, dear.
No, I mean, that's, and I would encourage people to go and read the petitions that we've done on the anthrax attacks. Those were the follow-on anthrax attacks, and the petition on the demolitions, because I'm telling you, it's like reading. They're well written, and they're not it's not complicated writing. It's not complicated. It's just laying out the story, and it's shocking. They're absolutely shocking. It's like reading you wish you were reading a small nonfiction novel. You really, when I first read, and that's the whole committee, of course, works very hard on this, but Mick is our leader, and as I said, he's quite brilliant, and he's a brilliant legal strategist. I mean, some of these obviously these victories the victory that we won and one that we think we might win soon, are because he really knows his law, and he knows how and when and where to apply it. But again, if you just look at the details and how they're laid out, and sort of in a timeline fashion, it's absolutely shocking, but it's also very heartening. It's very heartening because people have taken the time to dig out what happened and present them in a way that is very clear and presents the evidence and says, these are the applicable laws to these crimes, and it gives you hope that, okay, this is how this should be addressed, and this is how, and that's what's going to be on film, So I think that it's going to be both shocking but also heartening for people, because the work has been done. Just get it into a courtroom and do exactly what we showed you in this series of films.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to add a few. This is Barb, and I'd like to add some pretty major big picture points.
Please.
The first one is just to be absolutely explicit. The real perpetrators who killed the vast majority of the American and international citizens who died on 9/11 are still at large. They're armed with weapons of mass destruction. They're highly dangerous, and they can do it again. That's number one. So, people say, well, why should I care about this? They're still at large. They can do this to you again. Right. And we've proven that they did it once. And then I'd also like to make the explicit link between 9/11 and the anthrax attacks, which really were a single plot, a single conspiracy. There were two parts to it, but they are integrally related. And when people go to the Lawyers Committee website, lcfor911.org, at the very top, there's a horizontal menu. And over on the left, in the upper left, you will see the anthrax petition. Click on that. That's what Kristina was just referring to. And then over to the right is the World Trade Center Grand Jury Petition. Click on that. And that's what the film is going to be bringing to life, the evidentiary exhibits that are part of that World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7 Grand Jury Petition. So what is the link between 9/11 and the pandemic? Well, the link is the anthrax attacks, which were an integral part of the 9/11 attacks. And we have demonstrated that. We have demonstrated that dispositively, which in legalese means we've proven it, okay? And you will be able to see the evidence for yourself. It hits you between the eyes and the forehead like with a 2x4. All you have to do is read it. And what I'd like to do now, just before we go back to talking about the film and maybe about the anthrax petition, and I'd like to turn that over certainly to Mick to give a summary of the evidence in the anthrax petition. But I would like to have people remember that they can scroll down on the page for this show. And I've gone to the trouble for the show under 911 inquiry items. That's lawyers
in the
committee
fast
inquiry
links
items in Radio with Pictures. The first one is a summary of our legal victory on the Freedom of Information Act World Trade Center records case. Okay. And then you are also going to have links there for the grand jury petition on the World Trade Center. You're going to have also the 41-page court ruling on our legal victory on the Freedom of Information Act request case for the World Trade Center records. And number 2 is if you click on that link under the Lawyers Committee items on the homepage for the show page, you will see the article on our new board members. We have new board members in addition to Kristina and Richard Gage. We have 2 other very exciting new board members. You can read their bios there. The first one who joined our board in the last few weeks is attorney Bruce Lichty. And attorney Bruce Lichty is known, he's famous in the 9/11 truth community because he was the attorney for Ellen Mariani. Now, many people may not know her name. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. But Ellen Mariani, of all of the thousands and thousands of 9/11 victims' family members who lost loved ones on 9/11, either in the towers, the Pentagon, or the planes, or in Shanksville, of all of those thousands of 9/11 victims, family members, and survivors, only one said, I don't want the blood money and hush money, Feinberg Fund money. I just want the truth. I want to know why my husband really died. And that was Ellen Mariani, and her attorney just joined our board, Bruce Lichty. And the other attorney besides Bruce Lichty, who just joined our board, is Charlotte Dennett of Vermont. Charlotte Dennett ran for Attorney General of the state of Vermont on a platform to bring President Bush, Vice President Cheney, Rumsfeld and company to justice and accountability for their 9/11 crimes. And she has written a book called The People versus Bush, meaning at the time President George W. Bush, for the 9/11 crimes and how to bring them to justice. So, of course, both of these new attorney board members have many, many other wonderful credentials, and you can read about that at number 2 in the link there. The link in number 3, this is very important. Number 3 goes back to what I said, that the link between 9/11/anthrax, because the anthrax letter attacks in 9/11 were an integral conspiracy. And the link between 9/11 and the pandemic is the anthrax attacks, because the anthrax and the anthrax letters, especially to Senators Leahy and Daschle, were weapons of mass destruction of ultimate military engineered quality. And you will read about that in our anthrax petition, our anthrax letter attacks petition, in the menu at the top of our Lawyers Committee website. But the exciting thing about number 3, under Radio with Pictures of our items, is in this link, that will take you to the video of the Lawyers Committee's global live streamed event for the 20th anniversary of 9/11. That event went on for 8 hours, and you can watch it just an hour at a time or a presentation at a time. But the title was 9/11 anthrax, because it was an integral conspiracy, 9/11 anthrax to the pandemic, the current ongoing pandemic, life and liberty in the balance. You need to watch those presentations. Number 4, under our items, the Lawyers Committee items, is the Grand Jury Petition to the Southern District of New York. The big one that we're having, the mandamus case, where Mick will be in court on January 21st doing oral arguments. And the number 5 is the direct link to the Lawyers Committee Grand Jury Petition on the anthrax letter attacks. That is the direct link to the pandemic, and you will see why when you read that. So I just wanted to let people know what they can see if they go to the Lawyers Committee items on the page for the show. So I'll turn it back to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. That was helpful. And I highly encourage that you do as Barbara suggested. It will blow you away if you are not familiar with all this material. The extensive details and thoughtfulness of how they have put together all this information is stunning, as Richard loves to say, stunning. I love Richard. God bless Richard. I'm speaking of Richard Hoagland. You too, Richard Gage, but in this moment I'm speaking of Richard Hoagland, who couldn't be with us. I'm missing the audio. Yeah. I can hear you, Barbara. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So, Kristina, would you like to share some more about the show?
Well, I think the most important thing about this show and doing this show is again to reach people and to move people to get involved and support these efforts, because I remember I don't know if you know about the Government Accountability Project, but they take on all kinds of difficult cases. And I had worked on a petition to the Office of Special Counsel exposing. It was an affidavit. I submitted it on behalf of Hank Hughes, who was a senior investigator of that plane crash, TWA Flight 800 plane crash. And, there was a big cover-up involved with that. And so he'd written an affidavit describing it all, and that was submitted to the Office of Special Counsel. And after like a year or so, they finally came back and said, well, we can't do any investigations, so we can't do anything with this. And the Government Accountability Project was helping us on this. And I was so shocked. I was just so shocked. And I can't even describe. Tom Devine, who was the lawyer there working with us, I was sort of talking to him like he was my shrink or something, because I was so shocked that the Office of Special Counsel wouldn't do its job.
That they could get away with it.
Exactly. And he said to me, Kristina, he said, if you really want anything to get done, he says, you have to get the public behind you. You have to go out there and you have to communicate with the public. And I was like, but I'm trying to get this into the courts. I'm trying to get justice in the courts, because that's how you get the accountability. That's how people get punished. That's how things stop. He goes, well, you have to go through the public. And that's why this is to me, it's such a brilliant project, because you know what? Whether the courts want it in there or not, it's coming to the courts. And the people and the jurors, if we can't get into an actual real court, then we're gonna take it into a court anyway, and the jurors are gonna be the public. And the public has a lot of power.
Rightfully
when they
so.
are motivated. The public has a lot of power, and we are serving the public to the best of our abilities with the resources that we have, which is why we depend so much on the support of the public. But, you know, this I believe this is going to be a very powerful motivator, very powerful motivator.
And we have to educate those members of the public also about the legalities involved, so that they can sit and think, not like so much like an attorney, but not like a victim. On the other hand, right? So this is where Mick's mastery will come in, and I was hoping, Mick, that you'd spend a couple of minutes setting the stage for the grand jurors in this film about why this is coming to them, and what is the crime and what is the evidence. Can you talk about that too?
Sure. So, big picture, the film project as we envision it will actually go into substantial both legal and scientific technical detail about the demolition crimes, which, as Barbara properly pointed out, unfortunately was responsible for most of the deaths on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. The initial episodes should deal with what I call the first of three mysteries of 9/11. There are undoubtedly more, but three major ones that we're addressing, which is, why did three steel-framed skyscrapers fall, completely collapse on 9/11, killing so many people? And that mystery has been solved. And it's been solved by the hard work of engineers, scientists, architects from a variety of quarters over the last 15 years. And that evidence has been summarized very articulately by Richard. And we're going to be presenting it because the grand jury needs to understand we're talking about, as has been mentioned, really the intentional mass murder of so many innocent victims by the use of explosives, and that that crime is what the grand jury needs to investigate, hopefully solve, and then indict the appropriate wrongdoers. Now that leads to sort of the last two mysteries, which I hope our film project will get into in the later segments. It is certainly my goal to do that. We'll see if resources allow. The second mystery that I hope the grand jury itself will also be able to address, which is, why has the government and its agencies, and someone needs to go on mute again, I think. Why has the government and its agencies ignored all this evidence of use of explosives and even covered it up? And, you know, so was there a government cover up, and why? And we intend to get into that in the later stages of the film. And we hope the grand jury can address that and maybe issue a public report on it. We'll be inviting them to do that through the presentation in the film. The last mystery is basically who done it. You know, who is responsible for these mass murders and for putting the explosives in the buildings, which also ties to other events which are related, like the anthrax attacks, which we may talk about after the break.
So we're coming to a hard break now, Mick. So I think we're going to leave that for the other side of the break. You're on the other side of midnight. The show tonight is called Major Legal Breakthroughs in the 911 Conspiracy. Guests are Mick Harrison, Richard Gage, Barbara Honegger, and Kristina Borjesson. And we will return.
Richard C. Hoagland here. I'd like you to support The Other Side of Midnight by subscribing to Club 19.5 and thereby joining our unique and growing radio community. Tune in to listen to our fascinating guests, pioneers on the out there edge of science and thought, and gain access to exclusive member benefits. To do this, just visit our website, theothersideofmidnight.com, and click on the Join Club 19.5 link in the navigator bar or in the left-hand column. Membership costs $19.95 per month. That's 33 tetrahedral cents a day. I mean, it's the price of a couple of cups of coffee. As a Club 19.5 member, you'll gain access to this show and literally hundreds of previous shows on hundreds of different topics going back to 2015 that we have done. Our archived shows have the commercials removed, and you'll be able to download the MP3 files directly from the 19-point archives if you prefer. To enhance your listener experience, a new The Other Side of Midnight podcast is being added to all show pages, which will allow you to instantly search the show archives of Radio with Pictures, thus easily accessing the corresponding show. Plus, you can just as quickly access the entire podcast list when you're on the go. I want to personally thank all our Club 19.5 members because without your continuing support, this show would literally not be on the air. Please continue supporting the broadcast that provides you with the most interesting conversation available, talk radio at the cutting edge of science and thought, and if you like what you hear on The Other Side of Midnight, tell your friends, and continue growing the show by having them subscribe to Club 19.5 as well, because we need all of you. And when I say we need you, you're the reason we're doing all this. Hoagland, over and out.
And welcome back to The Other Side of Midnight. This is an amazing conversation we're having with the Lawyers Committee for 911 Inquiry. And in this third hour here, we're going to go into the juicy details that Richard Gage and his team have been accumulating information and testimony and facts that will boggle your mind. And Kristina, of course, if you have more to chime in, I'm not cutting you off. You're part of this team now, part of our show. It's so good to have this team back. I really appreciate you all. So, Richard, Kristina, where would you like to go now?
Well, I wanted to make sure that people really got what Mick was saying here about the crimes. He's going to come in, well, after Kristina introduces us as not just characters, but people who have cared for 15 years to dig up the truth and to get it into the courts in Mick's case. And but then so Kristina is going to present us as real people who had also were skeptical of conspiracy theories to the point where I never even imagined such a thing could be true. And upon its presentation to me in 2006, I found myself getting really angry that this is even, that I'm even listening to this. And that I was just really had to be dragged into it. And that happened very fast. And I mean, I was a flag-waving Reagan Republican. And I remember, rooting for Colin Powell as he was making his irrefutable case for weapons of mass destruction at the UN. And I wanted to go and get those bastards who did this to us. And really bad. That was, and I'd never heard any alternative theory as to how these towers came down. So when I heard this 45-minute presentation by David Ray Griffin on May 29th, I guess I would just call it shock. Looking back, I had to pull my van over and listen to this evidence, which I'm going to share with your listeners shortly in this third hour. But Mick is going to be introduced as a real person who had his own journey into this nightmare. And then he's going to have to present that somehow to the grand jury, and not just sugarcoat it either, and not put them to sleep. How are you going to do that, Mick?
Oh, a piece of cake, Richard. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to apologize to you, Mick. I was going to bring the call back to you, and I got carried away in my MC mode.
Well, that's okay. We
were making a point, and I cut it off. So please come back. Problem.
So Richard has invited me to do the impossible here, so I'll see what I can do on that. I mean, the trick here is basically to help the grand jurors as human beings approach the evidence like Richard and I were forced to embrace it. You know, I, with the Lawyers Committee, as Richard as an architect and as most of the scientists and engineers involved here, we're an evidence-driven, and in our case, law-driven organization. We didn't start with pre-formed conclusions. And in Richard, in my case, we resisted initially, I think, the assertions of the use of explosives at the Trade Center, and it had to be proven to us. But because of our backgrounds, his in architecture, mine in law, once it was proven to us, we then felt an obligation to prove it to the rest of the world, basically, and we've been trying to do that. And now our task, as Richard frames it, is to prove it to a grand jury. And we intend to do that. The trick here is to do, as Richard often says, to make the evidence come alive for the grand jurors and to not explain it in a dry and technical way, but as in a way that it sort of emotionally impacted us, but then to show that it meets the legal standards that a grand jury would apply in reaching an indictment, and even that a prosecutor would apply in pursuing a conviction. And the evidence is compelling. And I don't want to steal Richard's role here in describing it in detail, but when I walked into a meeting of some of my colleagues in Indiana 15 years ago or so and heard someone say there were explosives planted in the building, I had no idea what they were talking about. And these were environmental advocates working on forest protection. I'm an environmental lawyer, among other things. And so I said, you know, what are you talking about? And they told me about David Ray Griffin's presentation. And I said, is there any evidence to support this allegation? It's obviously a very serious allegation. And they said, yes, it's been developed scientifically. And in fact, we have a chemist here in Bloomington, Indiana, where I lived, who's been investigating this, and you can go talk to him. And that turned out to be Kevin Ryan, who's now one of the long-term best-known advocates from the scientific community for 9/11 Truth on the demolition front and other areas. And Kevin educated me. He's a whistleblower as well as being a chemist. I had his own experience being a whistleblower on 9/11, and so that's how I got involved. And I think our trick, Richard and my trick here in presenting this to a grand jury through the film, and by the way, Cynthia, we did invite the U.S. Attorney to allow us to present our evidence directly to a real grand jury. And the U.S. Attorney has not rushed to take us up on that invitation, but it could still happen if the Court of Appeals orders our petition to be submitted to the grand jury might invite us to come in. So not only do we hope to present the film to the grand jury indirectly by offering it as a supplement to our petition and having it delivered to the grand jurors, there is a chance we might actually, Richard and I and others, be able to essentially present it live to the grand jurors.
That would be great. And I'm wondering, does public persuasion affect the judge in making these kinds of decisions? Like if there's a public swell of interest?
No, I would say not. But there's an exception. That is, in freedom of information cases, the public interest value comes into play at certain times in the decision making. But for the Second Circuit case and our First Amendment and mandamus claims to get the petition delivered to the grand jurors, I would say not. Whether the grand jurors might themselves be influenced by the level of public concern is another interesting question. So, I used to be a teacher, well-kept secret. I taught mathematics and psychology for 10 years before I became a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for 30 years. So I started, at a very young age. But I think Richard and my job here is to basically be teachers for the grand jurors and for the public, and to show the eyewitness testimony of all the first responders combined with the finding of evidence of actual unexploded high-tech explosives in the dust, with a number of other technical areas Richard will point to, which actually have no other conceivable explanation scientifically than the use of explosives. And we need to help the grand jurors understand that. I occasionally make allusions to the Sherlock Holmes stories because a lot of the public follow those stories from Arthur Conan Doyle and understand the common sense and logic of some of the deductive techniques. One of them is a famous saying by the fictional detective: when you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. I think that's going to be one of the approaches we'll use with the grand jurors, is to help them understand that as much as we all would probably prefer not to believe the story, the evidence does not allow us any other alternative. So having said that, which I think is a long-winded answer to Richard's question, what we were going to talk about briefly after the break, which Barbara and Kristina have mentioned, would be the anthrax attacks. It's another component of this mystery of 9/11. A lot of folks don't realize it's connected, but it was a second wave of terror attacks, which started literally 2 weeks after the 9/11 attacks. A lot of folks don't remember that proximity in time. And it was used publicly by the administration and by some people in the media in the same way that the 9/11 attacks were used to essentially drum up support for the war on terror and the attack on Iraq and Afghanistan. So we did the Lawyers Committee did a detailed investigation of the anthrax attacks. We submitted a detailed petition to Congress, and now we've submitted a detailed petition to the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C., a separate petition for a separate grand jury. And to make a long story short there, Kristina, we hope to unpack some of that evidence in our film projects as well. We did, unfortunately, I'm sad to report, conclude that the FBI literally covered up key evidence regarding the anthrax attacks that would have pointed to, if not to the perpetrators, were at least to the source of the highly sophisticated, highly processed anthrax used in those attacks, which you may remember were used to attempt the assassination of 2 U.S. senators. A lot of folks have forgotten that, Senators Leahy and Daschle. And so that evidence will be discussed as well in the film project. And, sorry to say that one of the revelations will be that the FBI covered up some key evidence pointing to federal facilities and contractors. So I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Cynthia, or Richard.
Well, how kind of you, Mick.
Yes.
Thank you, but you didn't answer one question that was really important.
Okay.
Before the last break, the third mystery was whodunit. Would you just explain what? Isn't a grand jury supposed to indict people? So who are they going to indict, or are they going to indict? Are we going to recommend that they indict anybody? How does that?
Well, that's a good question, and that is a work in progress. I noticed that Kristina offered her individual opinion about complicity of high-level government folks in some aspects of this, and I think Richard offered something similar. And those are individual opinions. The Lawyers Committee is working on that question, the whodunit part. It's a work in progress. We did submit to the U.S. Attorney for the special grand jury in New York. We have not made that part completely public. A list of folks that we felt had material information relevant to the grand jury's inquiry who the grand jury may want to speak to. We did not identify any of those folks as suspects or perpetrators, and some of them clearly, I would think, would not be. But they may well have evidence the grand jury could use. It is the grand jury's job, Richard is correct, to pursue not only investigation to the point of proving a crime was committed, which we clearly can establish now with evidence in hand, but to show who did it and to pursue an indictment of those people. Now, you're going to learn as the film project goes along what we're learning about the whodunit component. And so the film project will, even though it's going to be reporting sort of the work already completed on solving the first mystery, thanks to Richard and all of his colleagues out there, the second phase about the government cover-up and the third phase about the whodunit, you're going to be learning more about that as we learn more about it. And we're going to actually offer the public a chance to contribute to our investigation as we go along for the film project. So you all out there can help us solve the whodunit portion.
Well, and you know, it's worth noting. Well, for the World Trade Center and Pentagon attacks, the 9/11 Commission, it just ended up calling it a failure of imagination in terms of who let it happen, and you know, pinned it on bin Laden, and that was that. And with the anthrax attacks, even I think the anthrax attacks are very interesting because the FBI pinned it on a scientist at Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is an Army, an Army lab that did work with anthrax. I don't know, it still does, right, Mick? Anyway, they pinned it on Bruce Ivins, who they pinned it on him after he committed suicide, correct? I think it was after, if I had my timeline straight.
He died, and then they pinned it on him, and they alleged he committed suicide. There's some question about the circumstances.
Right. But conveniently, it was pinned on a guy who was dead before anything could get into a court. So it's just, there's so much highly questionable stuff that when you put it all together, paints a very disturbing picture, but a pretty clear one, I'd say. Pretty clear one.
This is Barb. I'd like to add something, if I could.
Go ahead.
Okay. Even though the Lawyers Committee has not taken a public position on it, so I'm going to just state this as my own research at this point. But the Lawyers Committee is fully cognizant of these facts. And a number of them are actually included in our anthrax petition that was filed on September 11th, just passed, the 20th anniversary, with the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia and the U.S. Attorney General, Merrick Garland. And so I would just like to point out that we have become aware of very solidly documented facts that link anthrax, or at least the expectation of anthrax attacks, before and on 9/11 itself, not just weeks afterwards, which is the official story. And I'll just give you the tip of the iceberg of that. One of the facts that is in our grand jury petition that was filed with the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia just this past September 11th, 2021, is the shocking fact that not only, it's been known for some time, for many years actually, that Vice President Cheney's staff in the White House was put on anti-anthrax antibiotic Cipro on 9/11 itself on an urgent basis. But recently we have discovered that President George W. Bush and his entire White House staff that was on Air Force One and all of the military staff that were on Air Force One, on 9/11 itself, on the flight back to Washington, D.C. from Offutt Air Force Base, every single person on that plane, including the President of the United States, George W. Bush, were put on the antibiotic, the anti-anthrax antibiotic Cipro. So we basically have the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, and the White House staff put on anti-anthrax Cipro on 9/11. The question is why, and we are investigating that why. I just wanted to add that.
That's a big why.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now, another big why is why one of the FBI, the head FBI investigator wrote a very long report documenting his findings and questioning the FBI's choice of culprit. And this report is being kept under wraps still to this day. The public may not see it. So something's going on there.
So we may want to go to Richard and talk about the demolition evidence. Are we ready for that?
I'm ready, Mick.
Okay, take it away.
Because after all, we usually begin with the evidence so people know what we're talking about by going to the grand jury, what we're talking about by media censorship and the complicity in the drum up to war, what we're talking about with the crime of the century. So to me, I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road. But again, for 15 years, we've been educating the American public about this evidence, but we haven't had the organization until now to package it and bring it into the courts. So what is it that's going to be packaged? We always start with Building 7, and Kristina says this is where you need to start because there's people are disarmed about Building 7 because they don't even know about it. I mean, this is most architects and engineers don't even know that a third high-rise collapsed on 9/11, and so there's no trauma. Nobody died in this building, and so we've been encouraged by Kristina to start with Building 7 because the jurors themselves will be disarmed. They don't.
It's so
know.
astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing. People don't know.
Well, they don't know because they weren't told. It's been censored from the mainstream media. There's 2 examples of Building 7 being shown on, in both cases, Fox News actually is the only one outfit that showed it. I mean, and this is indeed a 47-story skyscraper. I have never heard of 52 stories in this building, and I've been doing this for 15 years. But anyway, it's tall. It's half.
That's from the NIST report. That's from what's-his-face's report.
That's very interesting because I've seen them refer to it as a 47-story skyscraper like everybody else also. But I need that reference if you help me. There's probably a couple of stories such as the penthouse or whatever that are added anyway.
So Kristina, Richard, I may be able to help you with this. I think the 47 stories is the Building 7 that collapsed, and the 52 is the replacement building.
There we go. That's it. There's a new Building 7 that is actually, it is taller, but it's not as big. That's right. Mm-hmm. So
Well, I just also want to underline the collusion between the media and what's going on here. Like, who owns the media was also involved in this.
Well, we'll come back to that. That's pretty important. I mean, that's dreadfully important, as it turns out. But regarding this building, at 5:20 in the afternoon, both towers have come down. Witnesses nearby hear explosions, and they're on record. And then this building starts to fall without any hesitation, immediately falling straight down, just like the old hotels in Las Vegas. I mean, it is incredible. It's a beautiful, perfect implosion, and everybody who sees it ends up saying, "Yeah, that's a controlled demolition." We go to architecture firms all around, not firms. Well, we do go to firms, but conferences all around the country, and we have a booth, and the architects walk by, and we show on a big screen this building 7 collapsing, and we go, do you know what this is? And he said, looks like a controlled demolition to me. They go, yeah, you're right. Do you know when that happened? And we go, we go 9/11. That happened on September 11th, 2001. They go, what? That's not one of the Twin Towers. They go, no, this is the third skyscraper to collapse. They're listening. They go, what? A third tower came down on 9/11? I mean, this is, and even for the jurors who are going to be most likely equally ignorant of this major fact, major for a couple of reasons. One, it came down on 9/11. 2, it wasn't hit by an airplane. 3, it came down the exact manner of a classic controlled demolition. And yet NIST, whom this film will be about, as Kristina says, a fight for truth between NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who was tasked, by the way, by Congress to explain these collapses to the American people, and us, who are trying to point out very basic, essential facts, like buildings don't do this, especially ones that are not hit by airplanes, especially ones that are steel frame fireproofed skyscrapers. Guess how many steel frame fireproof skyscrapers have been destroyed by fire in the last 100 years? Not one. And yet there's been dozens and dozens and dozens of fires in these buildings. So we've got their attention right now, right? And so like Kristina was implying here, this is a new phenomena in the destruction of buildings. We've had beams that have expanded, thermal expansion existed, but they've never brought down a skyscraper or any building, really. So fires are said to have expanded these particular beams, long span beams.
And not just any fire, just office, basically office equipment fires, which I was thinking about that, and I thought that's, and not on every floor, just on, I don't know, like 6 or 7 floors, Richard, is that correct?
Yeah, they're scattered, they're small.
Yeah.
And guys, can we hold it here, because we're getting into a break here.
Okay.
We'll pick it up on the other side, okay?
You bet. And when we come back, we've got a lot to share about people who knew about this building's collapse before it even happened.
Yep. Okay. You're listening to The Other Side of Midnight, and we'll be back after this break.
theothersideofmidnight.com. Tune in to listen to Richard C. Hoagland and his fascinating guests. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive member benefits. As a Club 19.5 member, you'll gain access to the rest of this show and all previous 350 episodes. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Support the broadcast that provides you with the most interesting conversation available. Talk radio at the cutting edge of science and thought. theothersideofmidnight.com.
theothersideofmidnight.com. Talk radio with pictures on demand. Liberate your hyperdimensional time scale and non-linearly access over 400 hours of conversation at the cutting edge of science and thought. Join Club 19.5 to get access to exclusive content that fits your interests and time schedule. Filter episodes by guest or subject. Membership costs $9.95 a month, 33 cents a day. Listen while you travel or as an environment to your endeavors. 8 cents an episode, 2.5 cents per hour of content. theothersideofmidnight.com.
Welcome back to the other side of midnight. This is Cynthia standing in for Richard C. Hoagland, along with Keith Morgan. And we are speaking with a lawyers committee for 911 inquiry. We were just speaking with Richard Gage about the mysterious building number 7 and also all the these tie-ins between the anthrax and the pandemic and all this information that has been hidden from the public and is now coming forward thanks to the amazing work that this team is doing, headed up by Mick Harrison. So I'm going to turn this back to you, Richard, and dazzle us. You already dazzled me.
Oh my God, this evidence dazzles me every time I talk about it. It blows me away. The no pun intended. The FEMA, the organization that David Cole has been bulldogging for years, and that Mick has recently won the opportunity to get discovery. One of the things that we're going to discover is that their report in May of 2002 included an Appendix C. Well, what was that? That was a metallurgical examination of the steel they recovered from Building 7. Oh my gosh, what did they find and produce in this? It's so important, they took up a whole appendix for it. The steel was sulfidated, a hot corrosion attack on the steel with liquid molten iron invading the grain boundaries of the steel. That's what they found, an attack on the steel with hot molten iron and sulfidation. What does that mean? That is the direct evidence of thermite incendiaries. It can be nothing else. It's such powerful evidence that what did NIST do with it when they took over the investigation in 2002? They threw it out. They didn't include it in their $20 million investigation altogether for all three towers. That Building 7 component of which was finally published in 2008, by the way, 7 years after 9/11. So this is direct evidence of taking the building down with thermite, and it was thrown out, covered up by NIST. This is extremely important, and the author of this report, Jonathan Barnett, not the appendix, but the actual report itself from FEMA, he said the ends of the steel beams were partly evaporated. Well, it takes 4,000 degrees temperature Fahrenheit to evaporate steel. Guess how hot fires are? Maybe 500 degrees, maybe 1,000 degrees, not 4,000 degrees, and not 2,800 degrees either, which is the temperature at which steel begins to melt. So we have a real problem with the official reports here, and the grand jury is going to see this. It is black and white, and we're going to be presenting it to them, and they're going to know this is a citizen these grand jurors are citizens, and so they have the power to judge based on common sense, and they have no motivation theoretically to cover up what's really going on here. So that's what they're going to see in this film. So right now, even you're getting an inside scoop into what the grand jury is going to see. And when we turn them over to the Twin Towers, they're going to see that those towers started dropping suddenly and smoothly and nearly symmetrically at first, straight down. In the first 3 seconds, there's no halting or hesitation or jolt when the top section meets and collides with the intact, cold, hard structure below. So what does that mean? It means that something must be removing that structure below. And that's where we have over 156 first responders hearing sounds of explosions, most of them before the towers ever start collapsing. You see, NIST told us this is the sound of a building falling down. No, it's before the towers started falling down, and there's witnesses of explosions before the planes even hit the towers, which is extremely important because we have corroboration of that by the seismic evidence, which proves that there are explosions deep underground, picked up 20 miles away, corroborating the first responders' testimony of explosions in the towers. So these seismic reports are by the Earth Observatory, Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, 20 miles away, and Columbia University did the reports, and they it's very clear what's going on, and that data has been fudged by NIST as well. So we'll go into that with the grand jury, but there is more evidence after the first 3 seconds of these towers coming down of 4 and 8 ton structural steel sections ejected out of the towers laterally at 80 miles an hour. Out, not down. How does gravity work? It works down. This is ejecting these steel beams and components 600 feet in every direction. So that's absolutely extraordinary, because that is direct evidence of high energy explosives, in addition to the incendiaries that we also have proof of in the towers, one component of which is before they come down, that there's molten iron flowing out of the side of the South Tower, and it is, by its temperature, we can tell, by its color, we can tell its temperature. It is exceeding 2,800 degrees, and it's white hot. That's amazing, but the buckets of the excavators are also picking up materials in the crab claw, and they are dripping with molten iron. By definition, again, that's exceeding 2,800 degrees. So we have the evidence of molten iron, not only from all this molten iron, but from all previously molten iron in the form of these droplets, which compose up to 6% of the World Trade Center dust. By some samples, molten iron droplets, they call them microspheres. They're everywhere. It's not even World Trade Center dust unless it has these previously molten iron microspheres. Well, where do they come from? They don't know. They don't tell us. They're just mystified. Well, what is the byproduct of thermite? Molten iron. And in an explosive environment like the center of the Twin Towers, that molten iron becomes aerosolized. And when aerosolized liquids, what do? They turn into spheres, just like out of a spray bottle. So these fall and cool with all the dust, and that's the only way that molten iron microspheres could get there, is because if they were part of a thermitic response. So this team of 8 international scientists, led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen, examined the dust, because they've collected 7 samples, or 7 samples independently collected or given to them, and they examine them. And they do a very, very detailed scientific study, which is peer-reviewed in a 24-page paper in the Bentham Open Chemical Physics Journal. What did they find in the dust? They thought it was paint chips, but they're not, because they're dual layered. So they know they were liquid applied, but interestingly, they at about 420 degrees Celsius, 758 Fahrenheit, they ignite, producing a lot of energy. The paint doesn't do that. So, and they produce what else? Molten iron microspheres with the same chemical signature as the molten iron microspheres found in all the World Trade Center dust by the U.S. Geological Survey and their particle atlas of 2005. I mean, it's incredible. The evidence could not be more self-corroborating and repeatable on an experimental basis. This evidence is all with us today. It's not gone. So we know exactly how, well, not exactly. We know this material was used, because there's about 4 tons of it in all the World Trade Center dust, these red-gray chips, and about 4 tons of estimated by extrapolation of these previously molten iron microspheres. They can't explain how either got in all the World Trade Center dust samples, but it's only explainable by one thing, and that is incendiaries. And let me tell you, there's no other reason for incendiaries to be involved. And if you look at the beams, you have 45-degree cuts with thick molten iron slag coming off of these 45-degree cuts. I mean, it is so crystal clear what happened here that this is going to be a cakewalk If we can get the film made and get it in front of the jurors and have it submitted on a silver platter to the jurors, they and the whole world are finally going to see the evidence that will back up the 9/11 families' calls for justice, particularly in the most excellent, recently released film, The Unspeakable, which was released over at AE 9/11 Truth. And it features family members like Bob McIlvaine and Drew De Palma and Matt Campbell, who lost their family members because they were, it's very gruesome, but they very small pieces, if any, of their bodies. In fact, there were 700 bone fragments found on top of a nearby skyscraper that were only a half an inch long. They're body fragments that were strewn 800 feet from the towers in all directions, small enough to hardly be identifiable. And yet still, there's 1,000 members, family members. There's 1,000 victims who have no trace found whatsoever of their loved ones, meaning they were vaporized. And so this really gets to the heart of the problem here. How do we make any sense out of that in a gravitational collapse, which we're told the towers were? It makes no sense. So we have the evidence that the family members need to pursue their calls for justice here, and we're fiercely going to be about making this film over the next several months and getting it out in bite-sized segments. So this is why we've got to have the public to make this film. I mean, if you want to see this evidence, and I've only presented it, audio. When you see the graphics that the grand jurors are going to see, and that you can see on my website, richardgage911.org, dozens of high quality presentations, you'll understand, and you'll want to support the effort to make this film 9/11 crime scene to courtroom. And so I encourage you to support this film in as big a way as you can, over at lc4911.org, lcfor911.org, and co-produce the film. We're inviting you to make this film with us, and it's all explained over there. So be sure to see that article on the LC website.
This is very exciting, Richard. It really is.
I think so.
I mean, if the public to have a chance to support your efforts and be co-producers. And, you're bringing our voice to, it's very exciting.
Richard?
Hi.
Yeah, Barb again. I appreciate your commenting on this amazing film, The Unspeakable, that folks can watch by going to the Architects and Engineers website. That's ae911truth.org. And Richard Gage, of course, was the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth 15 or so years ago. I'd appreciate you, Richard, just briefly focusing in on towards the end of that film, The Unspeakable. There is a short interview with probably the most famous coroner in the United States, Cyril Wecht, who was shown the evidence that you just touched on about what happened to so many of the bodies of the victims. And after all, we're doing this because of the family members of the victims of the explosions by pre-placed explosives and incendiaries in the World Trade Center towers. If you could just refer to what Cyril Wecht says at the end of the movie Unspeakable, because I think it's very important.
Well, he was looking at a forensic report, a medical report that talked about the small fragments of bones from one person, and there were several of these one persons, that were split into extremely small fragments and embedded into the soft tissue of people around them. And the exact quote, Barb, you're going to have to help me.
Well, I won't remember the precise quote, but it was his conclusion that I found very, very critical. And at the end of looking at the evidence and making a comment about it in the film The Unspeakable on the Architects and Engineers website, Cyril Wecht says words to the effect that given this evidence that there must be a new investigation of 9/11 and that he has absolutely no idea, that he is shocked that there hasn't been yet.
There we go.
Yeah. So this is extremely difficult information for people to accept. We understand that. But when you realize the big picture, the whole world, every American in the whole world knows now that the United States and our coalition partners were taken to war in Iraq on a lie, the lie of weapons of mass destruction. What they need to understand is that the United States and our coalition partners were taken into the war in Afghanistan based upon the massive lie of who attacked us on 9/11. And the people who really did that, the real perpetrators, are extremely dangerous. They are armed with weapons of mass destruction, and they are at large. They are still out there. We have to prevail. We have to prevail. This isn't just our fight. It isn't just the fight of the 9/11 victims' family members and the lucky few survivors of those attacks. This is all of our fight. We really need your help, people. We need your help to go to the Lawyers Committee website and donate what you can. Some of you may only be able to donate $1. Others of you may be able to donate more. But we need all of your help. We need to prevail for all of our sakes. So thank you. Thank you for helping us.
Thank you, Barbara, for making that point. Just underline it, highlight it, everyone. And we're drawing to a close of the show. We've got like another 5 minutes or so. Any points you want to make sure to get out there before we close? Any of you?
Maybe we should begin with Mick and then go to Richard and then Cynthia, and I can wrap up.
I think we still have Kristina, but so I'll give you my ever popular dog in the nighttime analogy from the Sherlock Holmes episode, Silver Blaze. For those who haven't read it, Sherlock was investigating the disappearance of a prize racehorse and went to the stable and noticed the dog and interviewed the people, and later he told his colleague, Dr. Watson, I want to draw your attention to the mysterious incident of the dog in the nighttime. And Watson said, well, the dog did nothing in the nighttime. And Sherlock said, well, that was the mysterious incident. And the point was something should have happened, but it didn't happen. And in that case, the dog didn't bark because the dog knew the perpetrator. And what we have here are watchdogs in federal agencies who are not barking. They're not barking about the demolition evidence and a lot of the issues we're talking about, and they should be. And that raises the question of why not.
Strong point.
Kristina, what say you?
Well, I just want to reiterate that this is the only organization that is trying to look systematically at all the crimes from all the venues and bring them to the courtroom. And if you don't bring it to the courtroom, you don't get accountability, you don't get justice. So just think about that and think about giving us your support so that we can do this job on a grander scale more quickly.
And I just want to underline that our freedoms are in the balance here. It's justice and our freedoms. As Barbara said, those perpetrators are out there. They become more emboldened each time they do something, as Kristina said. And we have to make a stand. We can't just be silent. And while we may not be able to go into the courtroom, we can certainly support our fabulous guests here tonight who are doing that, who on our behalf are fighting for our freedoms and for justice and for the justice of these families who have been torn apart by this terrible event. And it's a time where we're at the beginning of a new year here. And more than ever, each one of us has to reach deep within and acknowledge the truth that's there and stand up for it. We can't be silent anymore. We can't be complacent anymore because, hey, folks, you're next on the agenda. If we don't stand up, we're next. And for justice, for the sake of our children and these new generations who have been uneducated, deliberately hoodwinked, we need this information to go out. This film would do a lot into educating the young generation because they are our future. They are our future leaders. And they need to know the truth of what happened, and they need to know what was lost on that tragic day and what we are fighting for and what can come back.
And everybody can do something. It can be as simple as on your own computer, sending the link out to this interview to everybody who you imagine will be receptive to it. When you can send the evidence at richardgage911.org to every architect and engineer in your community. You can do these things very easily. And so whatever you do something. That's the important thing.
And we are at the bottom of the runway. So thank you for listening. This is The Other Side of Midnight, and many thanks to our wonderful, prestigious guests tonight.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.